Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Eric Williamson. Eric is the Chief Marketing Officer at CallMiner. As CallMiner's Chief Marketing Officer, Eric oversees all global marketing functions from brand and events to demand generation. Eric's marketing team works very closely with channel and sales to drive pipeline and CallMiner's explosive growth. Eric has over 20 years of experience in both technology and consumer products, marketing from both the vendor and agency side. Before joining CallMiner, Eric was VP Brand and Digital Marketing at Acura, an open DXP platform built around Drupal, where he led brand creative services, web ops, editorial, and demand generation. Prior to Acura, Eric was on the agency side of marketing, working as SVP Digital and Social Media at Mullenlow, and before that as VP Digital Strategy at the Martin Agency. During his career, Eric has worked with a variety of B2C and B2B brands, including Google, Microsoft, Intel, GEICO, Walmart, P&G, Pizza Hut, Acura, Royal Caribbean, and Hyatt. He earned his undergraduate degree from Texas A&amp University and an MBA from the University of Texas at Dallas. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Eric. Welcome, Eric.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. Now, before we jump into the conversation, I always like to give our guests an opportunity to share a little bit about their journey. So could you share in your own words how it is that you got from where you were to where you are today?
Sure. Well, you did a pretty good job of covering my bio in your intro, so thank you for that. But I've had I started my career out as essentially a BDR or an SDR is what they're called typically, at least in SaaS, which I think is one of the best first jobs you can have, especially if you have aspirations of doing something in either sales or marketing. So you've talked to a ton of CMOs who that was their first job as well. But so that's where it started. I spent a lot of time working in digital advertising, and then ultimately integrated, big agency advertising for a lot of big brands, and then flipped over to the client side and worked at a tech company called Acura, which you covered just briefly in that intro. It's an open DXP player built on top of Drupal, which is an open source project, and essentially. Think of it as a open source competitor to something like Adobe Experience Manager. So spent 3 or 4 years at Acquia, and after that was introduced to the CEO at CallMiner and had a lot of great discussions. And I have been at CallMiner as their Chief Marketing Officer since 2020. And we've had a really nice run so far. We've gone from about 40 million ARR to a little over 80. And we're still seeing some nice growth despite maybe some of the macroeconomic headwinds.
All right, perfect. Now, could you share with our listeners what is CallMiner and what exactly do you do?
Sure. So CallMiner we are the leader in conversation intelligence, specifically focused in more on customer service. So if you think of any large company that has one or more large customer service agents, contact centers, so they'll utilize our platform to ingest, so record and analyze every single customer interaction, whether that be a phone call to a customer service agent, texts to and from an agent, chats with an agent, survey data, all of that gets analyzed, and it's able to then turn around in real time and provide that customer service agent with guidance on how to be able to deliver a better customer experience, guidance on how to answer the questions or access resources better. And then ultimately, if you're able to mine through millions of customer interactions, there's extremely valuable insights that can be discovered. And so through machine learning and artificial intelligence, our platform delivers that, which is the larger value proposition.
All right. Thank you for sharing that information on CallMiner. We In leading up to the interview with you, Eric, I was shared a copy of the report, the CallMiner CX Landscape Report, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, right? As the chief
Of course.
So, could you share with our listeners, I would say maybe 3 to 5 of the top themes or insights that we were able to garner from that data and that report?
Sure. So first and foremost, the CX Landscape Report that you're referencing, it's an annual report that we publish. So it's original, it's original research for us. So we do a survey of 700 plus CX and contact center leaders across the globe. And then, what we'll try to do is keep a lot of those questions the same year over year. As new trends and topics tend to emerge, we'll introduce a few new questions, but that way we're able to ultimately keep a pulse on what is important and what sort of trends we're seeing with CX and contact center leaders across the globe. In this particular one, so in the one that we published in late 2023, obviously, and this is not going to shock anyone, but one of the biggest topics that was not new, but I would say the focus on it was extremely heightened, is around artificial intelligence. I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not, notice just the media firestorm around artificial intelligence, in particular generative AI, in 2023 and even today. Let's see. A lot of the typical data that we'll look at in that report and the findings have to do with, like I said, trends that contact center professionals and CX professionals are seeing within their own organizations. But I would highlight a few specific findings around artificial intelligence, since that seemed to be the dominant theme. What's interesting is, couple themes would be that nearly, this is not going to shock anybody, but nearly all of them are looking to implement some aspect of artificial intelligence in the next 12 to 18 months. The interesting substat to that is of those, over half aren't really sure what they're supposed to do. Basically, they know they need it, whether they were told this or whether they inherently think they need artificial intelligence in some way. So they're investigating it, but they are a little bit lost in terms of where exactly to apply it. So that was one of the first overarching thematics, is everybody wants it, but they're not sure what to do with it. The next is, now that we've moved a little bit beyond, maybe like the hype cycle of all of this, where I think everybody is rushing to go do something, and you've got a little bit of fear of missing out. Now we've started moving into the stage where companies are actually starting to try and implement some of these things. And what we've moved into now is sort of the reality stage, which is, they're starting to realize that there's some risk, inherently with this, largely around compliance, around the protection of their brand, because sometimes these generative AI models can have hallucinations, et cetera. So I think they're getting into the reality stage of actually trying to implement it and realizing that you have to take a much more responsible approach to how we think about this, and that there is no, AI silver bullet out there that's going to solve all of your CX problems. I think the last one, and this is the underlying aspect of this, is actually something that we have heard even before we started digging deeper into AI trends for CX leaders. And that has to do with how CX is positioned, among the entire company organization. So in many cases, CX is disconnected from the contact center, which is never good. Or you've got CX that is its own central thing, meaning you've got a CXO, you've got a team, and then in other cases, CX is sort of sprinkled in multiple departments. And so what this kind of leads to is a bit of a disconnect in terms of how you can roll out properly something as expansive as artificial intelligence within a piece of software across all these different pieces that are somewhat disconnected within the organization. The other thing it leads to is, let's say you've got a contact center, and you've got all this amazing data. Because of the disconnections here, some of that incredible data coming out of all these customer interactions is never actually making it further than the contact center because of those disconnects. So the last theme has to do with how companies typically will measure CX or a voice of the customer program. I think as everybody who might be listening to this podcast know, CX, when it all comes down to it, is largely has grown up and is still inherently based on surveys. So whether it be an NPS or a CSAT survey, but these are solicited surveys, solicited answers from a survey, which sometimes can be very polarizing. The big opportunity and where I think the industry is going is to combine that survey data with unsolicited data. And so this would be the data that comes out of contact centers and customer service centers, actual conversations that have emotion that we can measure, versus solicited questions and answers. So I think the combination of those two is where CX in general is going. And what you'll find is companies that are a little bit more mature and have a better org structure are already tapping into some of that data out of their contact center.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that's a great idea to merge the data that is collected from people who are actually talking to customers on a daily basis. I mean, the reality is, in a contact center, customers only call for two reasons, right? To make a complaint or to make a request. There's no other reason why they're calling.
That's correct. So again, you think of put it in the consumer perspective. Other than the major influencers, when you go put something on a review about a hotel you stayed at or about some restaurant you went to on Yelp, largely it's because it was either an amazing experience that you just can't help yourself, or it was such a bad experience that you just can't help yourself. So it becomes polarizing, which is why using surveys only is flawed to truly measure CX.
Agreed. All right, perfect. Now, what do you think leadership's role is? I mean, being in the industry and also being in marketing with a lot of exposure working with different organizations, what are your views as it relates to how leaders are actually utilizing the CX data? Are they supporting and using it to make data-driven decisions, or is it just one of those, reports that's generated and, it's there as a KPI, but they're not really doing anything with the information?
Sure. Well, largely, I mean, if you went and talked to, if you look at our CX Landscape Report or talk to most large companies, for the most part, they're using CSAT score, which is survey based, or an NPS score as kind of the one metric, if you got all the way up to the CEO level, that they're looking at on a regular basis to measure sort of the barometer of where their customer experience offering is at this point. I think from to your question, as a marketing leader in my case, one of the main things that we're responsible for is helping to better align the organization to where the right data is making its way up, helping to make sure that data is organized in a way that a CEO or a chief product officer, which is another beneficiary of a lot of this unstructured data and the insights from it, or even, in many cases, the CMO for me is able to get the insights, the root cause of understanding, what some of these issues might be that we're trying to solve for. So I think aligning the organization so that the data can reach the right people, and then making sure that data is packaged up in the right way to where it is executive friendly, is some of the things that a leader should be thinking about and trying to make this better.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine also not just spitting out scores in terms of, X% of this type of customer feels this way, but linking it to tangible things that, especially for leaders who think in dollars and cents. if we have a decline in this particular area over X period of time, what will this mean for our bottom line? What does it mean for future initiatives and innovation that we may need to implement? So that I would imagine that would be the kind of mindset they'd have to have.
Absolutely. Excellent point. And even if as a first step, you're continuing to just use NPS and CSAT, you should have an understanding, to your point, by looking at all of your forecasting and previous years' financials. You should be able to point to an increase in 1 point is going to result in this much at the bottom line. So I definitely agree with that point.
All right, perfect. Now, Eric, could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Well, let's see. App, sadly, probably the calculator on my phone, just because I'm constantly needing to tally up the percentages and different stats as I'm doing some of my own reporting at an executive level. I must open that thing up several times a day. From a website standpoint, trying to think, I utilize we utilize the analyst reports quite a bit. So Forrester, who is one of the top tier analysts, and the one who issued out the Forrester Wave that we're a leader in. So I utilize them quite a bit from a research standpoint, so that we can get a better understanding of where they predict the industry is going. So I definitely tap into Forrester and Gartner quite a bit for that. And then several of the, from a marketing standpoint and demand gen, so we have several vendors that we work with that, so 6sense for our ABM intent platform, Outreach for our BDR platform. And I find that some of the best resources that we can utilize for training for those particular teams. So I spend some time looking through their most recent thought leadership and training materials to try and identify how I can help my team get better.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Could you also share with us maybe 1 or 2 books that you've read? It could be a book that you read recently, or even one that you read a very long time ago, but to this day it still has had a great impact on you.
Sure. So I would say from a business standpoint, so separate out fiction from a business standpoint. I think some of the classics like Good to Great, probably some of the ones that resonated with me the most, and still you can go back and reference. When I flip over to the sort of pleasure reading fiction, Great Gatsby has always been my favorite book. It's not a long read, probably one of the reasons why, but I think I must have read that book 50 times.
All right, perfect. So we will have the links to those books in the show notes of this episode. Now, could you also share with our listeners, Eric, what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
So let's see, just keeping it, focused around CallMiner and my company and my team. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is all of us that are in tech, SaaS. We've really had a rough 2023, whether it be layoffs in terms of correction on overhiring in 2021. But mostly a lot of this is coming from just general macroeconomic conditions globally. And I think what I'm excited about is towards the end of 2023, we started to see, I think, a light at the end of the tunnel and some positive signals that we're turning the corner a bit, which I think anyone who works in tech should be excited about. I'll be interested to see how Q1 and maybe Q2 go for 2024 to see if that continues to more positive signals and we start to see our prospects and our customer base be a little less cautious with their budgets and a little less conservative and be willing to maybe do some expansion and some testing within the platforms that we offer. So I'm excited about that. And I think most tech companies are right now.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to give our listeners an opportunity to connect with our guests. So our listeners would have tapped into this episode. They're quite intrigued with what you do at CallMiner and also the journey that you've been on, and they'd like to connect with you online. Where can they find you online?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, you can always go to callminer.com. I think, any company worth their salt, the website really should tell an overarching good story about not only what our platform does, but who we are and what we stand for, and why that should matter for you. So I think our website does a good job of that. So you can go there, but definitely we have a presence on all the different social media platforms, LinkedIn. We're pretty regularly posting things. So follow us and we'll be in your feed.
Perfect. Now, Eric, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? If for any reason you got derailed or you got off track, this quote kind of helps to get you back on track.
Sure. So I don't know if this would be adversity, but we're constantly, I feel like we're under, we're in the midst of adversity when we're trying to, roll new campaigns out, roll new products out to the market. And, something that I and several of my other, C-level peers, perfection is the enemy of progress. So I think it's very easy to get in your own way and try to make something so perfect that it's going to be success, and that's just a fallacy. And it's much better to do all the due diligence, do all the work to make it as good as you can, but get it out there and then learn from it early and make some changes to it than it is to just be unrealistic that you're going to be able to perfect something before you launch it.
True. That's a very good quote. Excellent point. Thank you so much.
I don't know who to attribute that quote to, by the way, but somebody wrote it.
We'll put your name on it.
Right.
All right. Well, Eric, I just want to tell you thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule and hopping on our podcast and sharing all of this great content as it relates to what CallMiner does, about the report that your company had published, that you publish on an annual basis, and the great insights that were able to be derived from it, as well as moving forward, what organizations can look towards in terms of where they should be placing their energy in order to be yielding the greatest success as it relates to customer experience. So just want to extend greatest level of gratitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just want to remind our listeners, feel free to follow us on X at Navigating CX, and on Facebook, you can join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.